Let me, 1 second here. And sorry, I had a meeting right before this, so I did not have it set up very well. I think that's an issue everybody has.
I think it's the same every time. No worries.
All right, can everybody see the PowerPoint? Should be. Okay. All right, so I titled this Kanban versus Scrum, which one is right for my team? And the reason I titled it versus is I wanted to get you guys thinking. And if you notice here, I did cross out the word versus. And the reason for that is we don't want to ask Kanban versus Scrum. We instead want to ask Kanban or Scrum, or even Kanban and Scrum, to make it more about the principles and the practices. There are so many good ways to fit them both together, and there may be ways you're already using Kanban in your Scrum and you don't even realize it. So going over the Scrum portion, I don't want to spend a ton of time because I figured most of your teams are already using Scrum. So there's a lot of knowledge on Scrum already. So Scrum is basically you come in and give this idea for teams to use Scrum. Most of the time teams are running on specialist teams. So they have all these special skills on each team. So one team is developers and one team is testers. And you have everybody, and you're basically doing a waterfall approach. So you have a product, you're bringing the product in, your developers are developing and moving it on to your testers and they're testing, and then you keep moving through until you have a finished product. Ultimately, though, the problem with this is that if this team's priorities are different than this team's priorities, you can't get things done as efficiently because this team can't rely on the other team to be getting their work done as quickly as they want. So moving into a more Scrum aspect, you're going into teams that have every skill set on one team. So when you prioritize your work, when you figure out what you're going to do, your priorities are the same. So, and that works great, but you have a bunch of different skills on each team, and you're not, if somebody's out for the day, somebody takes a week vacation, you don't have those skill sets anymore. So it's really important to get ultimately to this, where you have multi-skilled team members that can share skills across each other. Obviously, people who started as a developer are most likely not going to be as good at testing as a person who started as a tester. But gaining those skills and that knowledge where you can do some of that is really effective on a team and making them cross-functional, multi-skilled, and really bringing that Scrum process out. So Scrum is an empirical process control, inspect, adapt, and transparency. Scrum has the Scrum values, commitment, courage, focus, openness, and respect. And Scrum is really, it's a framework. Scrum is set. Everything's set up. You can follow Scrum, and there's really a procedure that you're following. So that's going into Kanban, which we'll talk more about today. Kanban is a methodology. Kanban does not have as many rules to it. So Kanban is something you can utilize, but there's a lot of different ways people can be doing Kanban. So going into Kanban, Kanban comes from a Japanese word for signal or card. And Kanban was really started when Toyota Production System, TPS, they started using Kanban. And they named it to limit work in progress was their goal. So their sheets looked like that. And that was the card that showed all the information they needed. And if you want to learn more about Kanban and how it's changing in a technology business, this is a really good book by David Anderson, and it is the management approach he used while at Microsoft using Kanban. So Kanban has principles and practices. The practices of Kanban. So number one is to visualize. So on here, this kind of shows what a Kanban board would look like. It uses it as a delivery flow system, and the goal is really to make the invisible visible. So in Scrum, there's really not a requirement to show anything on a board. where I believe most people probably do have a board, that's not a requirement in Scrum. That is a requirement in Kanban, to have a visible board of some sort to show your work. And then Kanban uses cards to represent their work items. So those cards are going to show what the product is, how many you need to make, just going to show all the details of that. So the next thing in Kanban is to limit work in progress. And that's another huge thing in Kanban, extremely important. So as a team, you're going to decide how much you can have in each column. And that's visibly there. So everybody who's looking at your board, your stakeholders, your management, they can see what your limits are there. So you have a limit, you're selected. I kind of call that like the on deck in baseball. That's what you're going to do next. And then development. This is what you're working on currently. And so those are the WIP limits, and that's as much as you can have in those categories. The benefit of that is where a lot of times it's a push system and you're getting pushed work. A manager decides that G is the most important piece of work and you need to do that right now. So a lot of times management will say, okay, I need you to do G, and you're pushing it in and you're saying, okay, I'll find a way to get that done right now. In Kanban, you're saying, well, I already have 2 in my selected column, those are up next. I already have 3 in development. How urgent is this? What do we need to take out to be able to get G in there? So you're really able to show your management, hey, these are my limits. I can't take any more work. What do you want me to do to get G in there? The other benefit to doing that is that you're not sitting on a bunch of items where you're looking at this as a manufacturing facility. You know, they're ordering parts. So you're not sitting on a bunch of parts. You know what work you're having next. So in essence, it's saving the company money by having an amount of work you can do, by having a WIP limit. Next one is making policies explicit. And that comes back to the making sure you're sharing with management, you're showing it on your visible document that you're tracking everything, what your limits are. Making those policies explicit are making sure that management knows, making sure that your stakeholders know that those are your limits, making sure that your team knows. And I think that's a really important part to touch on, is that if your team doesn't have an agreement of how much work can be in each category, then you run the risk of somebody on your team being given work and bringing it in without really talking to the rest of the team. But if the team has agreed that the limit here is 2, the limit here is 3, they're able to come to a decision together, and a team member is able to say, I can't put any more work into these columns without talking to the team. So this group, the example right here is these teams have set, so items require less than 5 days to develop, they can go in as selected. You can only have 2 at a time. Items peer reviewed, they can be in the done. Items past UAT, they can be in production. So the whole team knows that they can't move something from doing to done until the item has been peer reviewed. And same, if they can't move something from backlog to selected until there's less than 5 days to start developing it. The next thing in Kanban is implementing feedback loops. So the Kanban method uses feedback loops to provide timely information on Kanban system health and quality of service. This is where you're going to see some similarities to Scrum. So there is a daily Kanban, and so that meeting is done daily. Where Scrum, you're talking about how you're meeting your goals. Kanban, you're going to talk about more, what are you doing for today? What work are you getting done right now? And making sure everybody's on the same page. Because a lot of times in Kanban, as a team, you're dependent on each other. So if you're looking at a Toyota, you're building a car. My job was to pick out the pieces from the inventory that we need and to pass it into the group working on it. And then somebody's job is to put the chassis on the car, and somebody's job is to put the tires on. So you're all essentially working together, and you need to have that daily meeting to make sure everybody's on the same page. And then there's a replenishment meeting. That's kind of like refinement. but you'd use a replenishment meeting more to populate your input queue with new work and look at upcoming work. So what's in your backlog right now? What work do you have planned to do? What is maybe a next priority that you're thinking? So talking about all those things, and a lot of that's making sure you have everything ready to go once that piece comes in. And then team retrospective. So again, the same as Scrum, there's a retrospective. The difference in Kanban is you could have a retro as much or as little as you want. You could have one daily, weekly, monthly. It just kind of depends what works best for your team to have a retrospective, but making sure you're inspecting for what improvements can you make in the flow to bring customer value and satisfaction to the forefront. And then the last one is improve collaboratively and involve experimentally. So the Kanban method requires collaboration to drive change. So you need to be able to collaborate with your team. You need to work together with pair programming, and instead of just handing things off. Inspect the quality of interactions and invest in skills and practices of collaboration. And with that comes the evolve experimentally. So to do these things, you need to be able to experiment and see what works. And the way you can kind of look at it is if I'm grabbing all the parts for a vehicle and I'm handing it to the next person, could that next person grab all the parts instead, and I could go help somebody at the end who is taking too long or taking a long time for something? Could I help them to make their process more efficient? So what's required is to use the Deming cycle to plan that experiment, try it out, see how it works. Conduct the experiment, check to see how it works, and if it works, act on it, continue to do those things. So yes, you may hinder your productivity for a little while, but you need to be able to try these things experimentally to see what's going to improve, because ultimately most customers want a finished product that's quality as quickly as possible. And that's ultimately the goal of both Kanban and Scrum. So going back to the principles, so we went through the practices, going back to the principles of Kanban. So start with what you do now, agree to pursue improvement through evolutionary change, and encourage active leadership at every level in your organization. So being the person that's gonna say, hey, you know, I'm grabbing these parts, but I don't feel like this is a good use of my time. I feel like my talents could be better utilized. And being able to say that and be a leader and give those improvements and be able to, as a team, be willing to try those things out. All right, so one of the biggest questions is what is right for my team? How do I determine if Kanban or Scrum, which one I should be using? So the biggest thing is the team chooses if they practice Scrum or Kanban. As an overall, I don't see any reason why anybody would want to practice waterfall, but you know, you're bringing Scrum. I think most companies are really bringing Scrum and pushing Scrum, especially in a technology industry, and saying, hey, we should be using Scrum. But being as a team to make that decision, hey, Kanban I think is better for our team, and being able to back up the reasoning why you feel Kanban would be better. And so these are some guidelines that you can kind of use to think about which is best for my team. So can your team plan out a small batch of work based on goals? If yes, Scrum may work. So that's where we talk about Scrum in a complex environment. Our processes are always changing. We're doing a bunch of different types of work. There's not really a similar process necessarily to each thing we do. That's where Scrum really works a lot better, because you can plan out 2 weeks, or you could plan out, you know, your PI planning, you're planning out 6 sprints. You can plan that work because you know what your project is, you know what you're doing, but each thing you do is really different. And then is your team aligned to one product? If yes, Scrum may work. So I can tell you for our teams, we are the life value stream. So we're working with new life products and things that relate to our new products. And so we're aligned to one product. Yes, we may do things outside of that if time allows. So if right now our priorities and as a company aren't the life products. Our team is capable of bringing on other things, but we are aligned to one product, and that is our first priority. Is your team unsure of what they'll be working on tomorrow? If yes, Kanban may work. So that comes from if you use, again, Toyota or producing cars as an example. If right now producing black cars is the priority because the black Camrys right now are selling the best and you have a large order for them, then that's what you're going to make as a priority. But if tomorrow you get a largest order you ever had for Sienna vans or Toyota Priuses because the gas prices are going up, then you need to change those priorities to be able to meet your customer needs. So you may not be sure, you may have an idea, but you may not be sure exactly what you're working on tomorrow. If your team is aligned to multiple products and services, if yes, Kanban may work. So again, using Toyota as an example, they don't just make one car, they make multiple different types of vehicles. So they're aligned to a lot of different products or services. And then the other thing to mention is you can also try merging Scrum framework and the Kanban method. So you're looking at, you see the Kanban board here, bringing those Scrum events for your flow over top of that is also an option. So that's the question also is, can I use both? So Scrum is more prescriptive in nature. It requires certain components. So it requires you have the roles, the Scrum Master, the product owner, the development team. It requires you have the artifacts, the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and product increment. And it requires you have those time-boxed events. So the sprint planning, daily stand-up, sprint reviews, and retrospectives. When you're looking at the Scrum guide, it gives really very specific guidelines for how you do things, and it's really rigid in expecting the team to adhere to those. And that's why you have a role as a Scrum Master. So you're ensuring that Scrum is understood and enacted on the team. So Kanban is really limited. Again, Kanban is a methodology, so it's not prescriptive. It has 3 rules. You need to visualize workflow, limit work in progress, and measure and improve flow. So with the rules, it'd be really easy to utilize Kanban and Scrum, and most Scrum teams are already visualizing workflow by using a task board, and they may not be limiting WIP. So I think that's one thing a lot of teams struggle in Scrum is how can I limit WIP and how can I work with my management to understand that we can't just bring new work in all the time and understand there are limits. So that's I think that would be a really valuable thing in Scrum, but I think there are a lot of teams who have challenges with that. And then measuring and improving flow. So that's another thing when you don't have any WIP limits, you're bringing a lot of work in, do you have time to measure and improve flow? So how can you bring less work in, creating those WIP limits to be able to measure and improve your flow of your process? So taking that time to mob programs, taking that time to improve your flow and experiment is really important within Kanban and should be really important also within Scrum. So going on here, can you guys see, because it looks like it's connecting. Can everybody see the board?
Sorry, you froze for a little bit and now you stopped sharing your screen.
I didn't mean to. It popped up that it was still connecting. Now, hang on a second. Let me go back to the technical problems are always fun. Hang on a second here. Oh, it like fully disconnected from the Zoom. So.
Well, you're still talking and we can still hear you.
Well, I'm on my phone. I'm on the phone instead of the computer because I never trust that the computer is actually gonna work the whole time. Is that bad that I don't trust it?
I think we've all been here where things don't work exactly like you expect them to.
Yep.
All right, we're gonna try sharing again here. Let's see.
There we go.
Yep. We can
All right, perfect. So we went through this one here. Let me get this. Oh, and now it's going to make me go through this whole thing again. Hang on a second. Too many slides. All right, so the other question I get a lot is, can I use Kanban if other teams are using Scrum? So at least here at CUNA, we have value streams. And so we have multiple teams under a value stream. And one team could be using Scrum, and another team is currently using Scrum and wonders, hey, can I use Kanban even though I'm working with a Scrum team? And the answer to that is yes. And how you can do that. So you can set up your Kanban board to still fall within sprints for consistency and tracking purposes. So being able to still run in a 2-week sprint, so setting up your board that way. And then it just allows you to move your work over every 2 weeks, which is a perfect time if you go down here to put your retrospective every 2 weeks like the other teams do. So you're having retrospectives at the same time. Again, there's no cadence in Kanban that requires you to do retrospectives at a certain time. But by having those retrospectives at the end when you're moving your board over, it allows you to say, hey, why are we moving this over? Is this still a priority? How did we do the last 2 weeks in our process? Is there anything we can improve? Is there anything we can experiment on? So it's good to have those. And if you want to line up with the other teams, that probably works the best to be able to share information with each other. Continue to have a daily Kanban that's similar to daily Scrum. You're not really talking about a goal, but you're having a daily meeting where your team is meeting together and talking about what you're doing for the day and talking about any issues there is. And then use Kanban for your team, but still participate in other events. So maybe you don't have a review or planning, but by participating in the other team's review and planning, you can always be a part and know what the other teams are doing. And you can always have a review in Kanban. Again, that's just saying, hey, this is what we accomplished for the last 2 weeks. Look at how much we did, and how could we accomplish more in future sprints. And again, not a sprint, but future 2 weeks. I'm so used to Scrum. So many Scrum teams are using parts of the Kanban methodology and don't even realize it. And I think that's really important because a lot of Scrum teams are already visualizing their work. Some Scrum teams are setting with limits. A lot of Scrum teams are trying new things, seeing what works. So there's a lot of things you're probably already doing Kanban-wise that you don't even realize you're doing. And then the last thing is, like I said, there's so much good information about Kanban. I could fill hours talking about it. And I didn't really want to do that today. So I'm glad to answer any additional questions that teams have, any specific questions on issues you're having using Kanban, struggles you're having trying to figure out what's best for you. Dave Steggy has also said he'd be glad to talk with teams. He's one of our Agile coaches here at CUNA. He's glad to talk with teams in regards to Kanban, help out. I know he has a Kanban class that he may be able to offer, or just to help your team with any questions you have. And so I'm glad to answer any questions anybody has today, if there are any.
This is Bob. Who's running Kanban at CUNA Mutual right now?
I think that Jenny Drawley's annuity team is using Kanban right now. And I know, I believe there are a couple other teams using it.
AppOps Predictable is using it.
Team is using Kanban.
AppOps. Okay. And source system.
Is AppOps doing it for the predicted and unpredicted work, or just the?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we're all sharing one board. Yeah, this is Travis. We're all sharing one board because both teams can pick up stuff from either section, predictable or unpredictable, if there's time or need.
So are you a team where one of you is using Scrum and one is using Kanban? Or like a mix?
No,
question
we
for-
started out. Is that for Travis?
Whoever just said that they share the board and they can take stuff.
Yeah. We started trying to kind of be Scrumban, but it's really been more effective to just be straight Kanban. And the unpredictable team tends to fight the fires, and then the predictable team takes their stuff that still needs research or long-term solutions, root cause analysis. And so therefore, if the unpredictable team didn't have anything to do at the moment, they could look at things that needed some research maybe and pick that up. And if they were overrun with stuff, then the predictable people can get in and help them fight the fires for a little while. So that's the theory. Did you want to address WIP limit, Amanda?
Yeah, I was just going to mention something that I heard Travis say is Scrumban, because a lot of people love to call it Scrumban. It's really encouraged by Scrum.org, and I think it really makes sense to call it Scrum with Kanban, because really Scrum being a framework and Kanban being a methodology, you're really bringing Kanban into your Scrum. So that's why I think it makes more sense to call it Scrum with Kanban, because you're really just using the Kanban methodology in your Scrum framework. That makes sense.
Okay. I am duly chastised.
No, I just thought I'd point it out because I hear the word Scrumban all the time. So you're not the only one.
We like
it's fun
terms,
to say.
Yeah.
So what was the question in regards to WIP limits?
Yeah, do you want to just touch on WIP limits?
Yep, so WIP limits are basically saying, so if you looked at it from a Kanban standpoint, you're not having sprints, so there's no set time frame that you're setting these WIP limits for. So your WIP limit, say it's 2, like in the example, that means that 2 things are all you can have and you're on deck. So going back, I can kind of go back to, because it's easier to kind of visualize it here. 1 second here.
Is it in on deck or is it in progress?
So it's both. So let's see here. There's where it had WIP limits. So right there is your on deck. So those are your selected. That's what you've selected to do next. And the reason you set that WIP limit is if you use it as a reference to like a manufacturing facility, they're selecting this work that they're going to do next. That allows you to say, okay, we need to order parts for this. Because one of the huge benefits of the financial savings is that instead of ordering parts for everything you have in the backlog, okay, we need to order all these parts, you might not get to L for 6 months, and you're sitting on parts for 6 months waiting until you get to it. And that's a huge cost to the company because you're spending money, you spent money that you're not making back, you're spending money storing these, and it ends up being a huge cost where if you know, okay, I selected D and E, these are going to be my next things I work on, you know that, hey, I need to order parts for this. So, hey, if you're looking at it from a technology standpoint, we need to do this, this, and this to prepare because that's going to take us time. And when it comes into doing, we're not going to be able to get to it until whatever is done. So having that knowledge of what you've selected in your next work and having a limit there, because you can have managers who come in and say, hey, I need you to do G right now. So you can tell them, okay, I have D and E selected. What do you want me to take out to be able to put G in there? So that's why it's great to have that visualization in your selected. And then once you move those over to doing, okay, so if you move the D over to doing because you've moved B and you moved A, then you can select another thing. And then you know you can only have 3 things in your doing. So you can only be doing, you could be doing 3 or have done 3, but you can only have 3 in these columns. So that's again, setting a precedent for your managers, for your leadership, for your stakeholders to say, hey, we're doing 3 things right now. If you need me to do D right now, I need to put back B into my selected and bring D in. So it's really just setting that priority and limiting your work so that you can come out with a successful product and not have 15 different things you're doing, you know, not to the best of your ability because you're overwhelmed with work.
Okay.
And that's where you're looking more in a
helpful.
push system.
Mm-hmm.
Did that answer the question?
Thank you for revisiting. Yeah, just wanted to revisit that a little bit. So.
Yeah, that's a really important thing within Kanban. So, yep. Any other questions?
I have lots of questions, but I always do. But one that I am wondering about for the Kanban and Scrum teams that are using the same board, do you use like a paper tool or do you use a remote tool? Like, are you finding that you have the right thing to make that visual for the team? Does that make sense?
Travis, this might be something you can answer because you're using both.
Oh.
You guys have it on one board?
Well, yeah, we're really trying to be, I guess it is Scrum with Kanban because we're, doing daily meetings and retros and all that kind of, we're not really doing sprints is the kind of what's left out. So we're considering ourselves more Kanban than anything. And yes, we're just using one board. We're on Azure DevOps, and it works really well because we're going through and refining, or what's the other term? It's not refinement. It's
Yep,
for
I was going to
Kanban.
go to it. Yep, I was going to go to it because I was going to say in regards to the daily, in regards to your daily, those are still done within Kanban. So you still have a daily meeting and you still have a retro. So you're actually, I mean, you might be doing some Scrum. I don't know without knowing all the details, but you really are doing Kanban. Let me go back here.
Yep. And the one board is working really well for us. Everybody's getting more used to that, and we're able to look at it as swim lanes, and we've kind of set those up. I don't know that we're purely within whatever rules are out there. We recently created a pause swim lane because sometimes you're working on, you've got the two whips, say, and you're working on a couple things, and then something comes in that really supersedes one, but we didn't want to move it all the way back to just our approved column so we could remember that this is the thing that we were in the midst of. So we'll push it back to paused. We drop it back one to the left and bring up the new thing to be in progress. And then we have also a waiting on others column because we have a lot of people who just have dependencies on other teams. They'll get something to a certain point and they're going to have to wait a couple days or a week for someone. So we push that to waiting on others. And then we kind of know, well, that stuff is sort of out there waiting for us, but we still have to be working on things in between. So those have helped a lot, I think.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits to Kanban. It's really flexible. So, I'd have questions about the waiting on others. What other options could you do with that? But again, Kanban is a methodology, and you can really use the Kanban methodology and implement your own things as well. And I just went back to this slide because it talks about the daily Kanban. So, and then the replenishment meeting you said you have in the retro. So you're really doing everything Kanban asked in those events.
We're doing kind of a replenishment once a week, and we're going through things more often than that to kind of set. People are free to put in a new PBI, but as a team, we like to set the business value and the effort, and then those define the priority of that for the team. And then in replenishment, we can move those up and approve them and have them basically in the backlog ready to take.
Yep. And you're a great team to look at in doing Kanban because you guys are dealing with a lot of different products or services. So that's a really great reason to use Kanban.
Yeah, we have a big mix of things going, and I would say that the waiting on others a lot of times is something like, you've got something ready, but you're waiting for a server to be spun up, and
Yep.
it's not going to be spun up next week. We can't install it, or another team has to put something in before you can put your thing in. Just a timing issue, and so that's helped. I think you don't lose it. You don't lose track of the things that are waiting because they're at the forefront all the time. You can see those waiting on others, and then you either pull it back to in progress or you do your thing and then move it to done. And
Yeah,
so
the only
it
questions
really
I'd
gets
have
close.
The only questions I'd have on that is, do you have a WIP limit to how much you're putting in the waiting and others for others column? And how do you go about that when it ends up back, if you're waiting for others and then there's more work for you to do, where does that go in the doing column, and how do you move something out to still stick within your WIP limit?
Yeah, we took our WIP limit off of we have a WIP limit for the waiting on others as a column, but we don't have it for individuals. Just because we have one person that's doing a bunch of stuff really dependent on other people. Like he's got 5 things in there right now. Most everybody else doesn't have anything in there, but he is very dependent in the things he's doing on other people's interaction, other teams. So
Yeah, so maybe that's something to look at. How can you create individual WIP limits if everybody has different skills? How could you create individual WIP limits so one person doesn't have 5 different things on there and other people have 0?
yeah, I think it's just a facet of his position, the stuff that he has to do and the things that his um, services interact with other teams in a way that a lot of us don't.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
it's
And some of that's
it's
just
just what we came to an agreement that was the best way to deal with his stuff.
Yep. And some of that just comes from experimenting, seeing what works best for your team. And again, there's not strict rules in Kanban, so you can really use those things however, but making sure you have those WIP limits and the visualization and all of those types of practices within Kanban is really important. So awesome.
Yep.
Any other questions?
You said you had more, Angie.
Well, I always have more, but I was giving other people an opportunity to ask. Amanda, you mentioned value streams, and might be a little bit off topic, and maybe this could be something that we do for a future meetup, but I am curious about how you guys went about doing those. Is it something that you guys have always done? Is it something new? Just because I do think that value streams might help identify some blockers or things sooner for our team.
No, it's a pretty new thing in our company, and I think that would be a really good meetup topic, and I can ask either another Scrum Master or manager if they want to come talk to that, because I think it would be a really good longer conversation, and like how we determine what those value streams were, how we tried to align things, because the goal of the value streams was really to have a focus. And I think we came from a place where we were doing a lot of project teams, and once that project was done, then our teams changed to a value stream team, where the hope is that that value stream is always going to be around long term. We're always going to have products coming to that team, and to make teams, if you go back in to make teams that are cross-functional and cross-skilled, that could basically take on any work if priorities were to change. So that was the ultimate hope of it, and to know where each type of product goes in and what teams they go to. So that was the ultimate goal. But there's a lot more detail to that. I was trying to really simplify it. But yeah, I think that'd be a really good topic, and I can definitely ask someone if they'd want to speak to that.
That would be awesome.
Yep, absolutely. Any other questions?
I will probably have more, but I do want to make a comment that I think you're right, where a lot of our teams probably use a combination of both of these things, because I very much saw we are a service company, so our projects change so much, and we do support on everything we build. So the support itself is very much like a Kanban flow, because whatever's urgent is urgent. And then we have our projects that we have more knowledge of what's coming up and can plan it a little better. So we're kind of a mismatch of everything together.
Yeah,
so it's kind
absolutely.
of refreshing to hear that other people do that too, and it's all good. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to bring Kanban methodologies into your Scrum. I mean, there are so many great things about both of them, and I think they complement each other. They work really well together. Any other questions?
I was going to say last chance for questions.
Yeah, to your point, Angie, if you've got stuff like our app ops team fighting fires, you've got a client with a problem, you can't say, well, let me see what sprint we could put that in. It looks like maybe we could get that in next week, and that's got an SLA of another week. So sometime in the next 2 weeks, we'll try to fix that for you. You won't have the client anymore. So.
Exactly. We wouldn't be doing work anymore. Yep, for sure.
And that's where it's nice to be able to say, absolutely, I can fit that in. We got to figure out what we need to take out to be able to fit that in and stick into your WIP limits. But being able to make those changes frequently.
Yep.
So we didn't really do introductions at the beginning. I'm curious to see if we have some people other than CUNA and Far Reach today, because I can only see first names. So can we just go quickly around and see who's here? Just speak up. I'm Angie from Far Reach.
Sure. This is Travis. I'm with CUNA, and I've worked with people from Far Reach before, Mike and Chad and some of those people way back in the early days of Cedar Valley INETA. So.
I know there's other people on.
I'm assuming they're CUNA groups.
We have 15 participants. Yeah, there might be a couple non-CUNA. I think most of them look like CUNA employees, but.
So I did try to reach out, like purposely send some emails to some other service companies similar to ours to try to, just share that we're doing this. So if anyone else has other ways to reach out to other companies, because I do think it's super beneficial to have multiple different types of companies come together, and it's always interesting to me to see how similar our work is, even though we do such different things.
Yeah, because I would love to hear from other companies and share what they're doing, because I think every company has learning opportunities from other places.
Agreed. So we'll just keep continuing to work on that. I did want to share a few things. One, next time we have Jeff and Jeff from CUNA speaking on superpowers of product ownership. Are either Jeff or Jeff here?
I don't think I saw them on there.
I see a Jeff R on the list, but I don't think that's one of the Jeffs.
Nope, it isn't. It would be Jeff B or Jeff M.
So they'll be speaking next time on superpowers of product ownership, which is really exciting. Are there any other future topics? So value streams is one I would love to hear about. Are there any other topics that people are interested in that we could try to find speakers for the upcoming meetups? Nothing? All right.
I would say if anybody can think of any ideas, could they reach out to you, Angie?
Yes, totally. So I'm super easy to find. Just Angie at farreachinc.com. That's my email. I would love to hear anything, any insight on future topics, or even companies to reach out to get to join. or feedback on how to run the meeting better, any of that, I will gladly take it. So,
Perfect.
Amanda, do you have anything else?
Nope, that was it.
Thanks for speaking on it today. I was excited to hear about it.
Absolutely.
Well, have a fantastic.
Will you make that deck available?
Yes. I will put it on the Facebook group if you want to share it with me, Amanda.
Yeah, the recording, absolutely.
Well, the deck he was saying.
The whole deck, yep, I can do that too.
Perfect.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Yep, bye.